We're going to take an hour right now and talk about a topic that's a little tricky to talk about on the air, but you're going to want to stick around because we've got a powerful 60 minutes in store talking about something that's tough to talk about, and that is suicide. Recently in the news, we had a situation where 5 members of the Santa Clarita Sheriffs, one was in Antelope Valley and 4 here in Santa Clarita, 4 committed suicide within a 24-hour period, a 5th one tried, and so certainly law enforcement and first responders are having a tough time adjusting. We're going to talk about that. But all of us have experienced a friend or a loved one who has died from suicide and leaves everyone scratching their heads as to why they did it. And obviously it's being done for a lot of different reasons. But we're going to delve into that a bit with Tim Traurig. Sorry about that, Tim.
No problem.
Who's the founder and president of the Guardian Santa Clarita. And why don't we take a second or two first and talk about what the Guardians is all about?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me on. And, Guardians is something that I'm just really passionate about that definitely was created and is for our first responders and our veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, men and women. And it is a place where these men and women can come and find connection, camaraderie, and support if it's needed. And we really felt there was a need. And there's been a need for a long time. As a lot of people probably know, this population are tough nuts to crack to get them to be willing to open up and be transparent. So we saw a need. We decided to take action and do something about it, and Guardians was created.
But as we've been seeing in the news, both here in Santa Clarita but throughout the country, the amount of suicides, the percentage of suicides has skyrocketed for first responders, for people in the military, for people on the police force, firefighters, other first responders. Why is that, do you think?
I think there's a couple of reasons, and you're so right. The stats have really increased. Matter of fact, now more firefighters and law enforcement are dying by suicide than in the line of duty, which is horrific. So
Wait, say that again, slowly.
So more law enforcement, police officers, and firefighters will die from suicide than in the line of duty.
Wow.
And so there's a crisis.
Let that sink in for a second. That is really something. So
yes.
I know Jen, our board up here, she did a wow look expression too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you would obviously assume they're in an extremely dangerous situation. Their jobs are volatile to say the least, and so that makes you wonder. Let's dig deeper, right? What is going on? These poor men and women that are experiencing this. What's going through their minds?
Yeah. And just to give you a little background on myself, I spent 35 years with LA City Fire, and I retired 8 years ago, and about 2 years after I retired, I started Guardians. And what I had, over the years, I've seen a real culture change, too. When I came on, I was just a kid. I was 19 years old. I was exposed to a lot of things I'd never seen before, dead bodies, things like that, and put in situations where I'm dealing with traumatic stuff, and it was so foreign to me. And to try to figure out ways to cope with all that, I had to develop some skills, and they were very helpful, but they also have collateral damage to those kind of skills, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, later. But I think what's happening is we've reached kind of a red line in the fact that I think emotionally, mentally, a lot of our first responders and veterans have just been maxed out. The call loads have greatly increased since I came on the job back in the 80s. These guys and gals, my dad's retired LAPD, also was a Korean War veteran, and the amount of calls and the amount of stress and incidents they're exposed to on a regular basis has increased greatly. So the constant barrage of emotional situations is just hitting them left and right. And then you take some of the politics that have been going on amongst this population of people, especially our law enforcement officers. You could go back to in history and look at our Vietnam veterans and what was going on politically there and the effects that had on them. You kind of see a traumatic impact of response from community, from politicians on what's been happening, towards our law enforcement officers. And that has not only an impact on those individuals, but has an impact on their whole family, because they know that their husbands and their wives are leaving every morning, going out there to protect the community and put their lives on the line for people they don't even know. But they've sworn an oath and they've committed to do that. And then they go out there to do that, and then in some spaces there's individuals and people that try to make them look as though they're the bad people. And yes, every department, every business, there's always some people that are every place has a bad apple somewhere probably. And so sometimes that happens, but then those things get used politically to make it seem like there's an overarching problem with men and women that are law enforcement, that do this work every day, when not. I know these men and women. I've worked around them. They've been family members and friends, and these are men and women that have a passion to serve people.
Yeah, that's why they went into it. They want to serve. They want to be there to help someone in an emergency or a dire situation. And I think, you're talking about they're going through these emotions, and you have obviously seen your share of awful things. And I think a lot of times, maybe people who aren't in law enforcement, you think, well, they're heroes. And so they're built of steel, they're, Teflon, things don't bother them. And,
Yes.
and obviously that's not the case. I think there's this weird illusion that, well, that's a police officer. Of course he's brave and strong, and of course he can handle anything thrown his way. And it's not the case.
Yeah, and that's true. That perception that is out there. Also, that perception kind of pushes these guys to give that persona to, even in their own lives, to say, hey, I can handle anything.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when it comes to mental health and struggles that they go through, and that's part of some of the issues that happen amongst this population of people, fire, police, and military, is they're fix-it people, right? They get the job done. So when something's going wrong in their own life, they decide, I'm going to fix it. And when they can't fix it, because it's their family or it's them, and they stay quiet. They're embarrassed. They see it as a weakness if I do have to reach out for help. So they stay quiet in the darkness and they struggle. And it's not just with stuff that's on the job, just life. I mean, life can throw some pretty hard balls at us. And so when you have all of that you're dealing with on the job, the trauma and the things you see on a regular basis, and then God forbid something happens in your own family, which was my case, all of a sudden you reach the peak and something pops, and all of a sudden it's too much for you to handle. And so what starts to happen? You try to find ways to cope. Well, your great coping skills you learned on the job, which is to box your emotions, because the only way you can survive seeing trauma and drama day after day after day is to develop a skill, and I call it a skill, to take those emotions and put them in a box and move on, so you can go to the next call and the next call and the next call. But there's collateral damage to that, and pretty soon that box fills up. There's no more room in there, and it takes one incident, it takes one situation or a couple of situations close. It could be a family situation, it could be a divorce, it could be a job-related situation, but all of a sudden that box has reached its capacity, and guys and gals start looking for ways to manage that intense pressure. So they start going to drugs, alcohol. It comes out in anger, domestic violence. Their relationships start to suffer, so we got high rates of divorce and those kind of things. And you start seeing the collateral damage of that skill they developed for on the job start to affect their family. And when these men and women go home and try to be a dad, a mom, to a husband, a wife, and they're still living in that shove my emotions into the box mentality, there's a lack of connection with, and I found that in my case with my kids in their teenage years, because I couldn't connect emotionally. That wasn't comfortable for me. Emotions were uncomfortable.
And add to that, for many first responders, the percentage of injury is probably a lot greater, and so they're taking pain pills and
Yes.
getting hooked on that, as well as your laundry list you gave, Tim, of the other stuff. I'm going to add one more thing. You talked a little bit about the one bad apple out there, as we've seen in any organization, but I think in your case, in the case of first responders, for policemen especially right now, law enforcement, the media, our business, plays a really nasty role in that. The one bad apple is highlighted and put across the airwaves,
Yes.
put in the newspapers, and pointed out without showing a balance on the 99.9% of the great stuff being done by law enforcement.
Yes. And those things then get used for a political purpose or an agenda that has nothing to do with making sure these men and women are getting support and help and recognizing that there's a need there. They just they use it for other reasons, which has another impact on these men and women when they see that their organization, their department is being made to look really bad because of one or two individuals that made some bad choices, did some things that were wrong, no doubt. And then it's painted with a broad brush that that there's a culture on that department of men and women who wear the badge that are, doing all these bad things. And it's just not true, because they have an amazing heart. I mean, think about it. Who for somebody to get up every morning, and that's another thing too that I think we need to recognize, they're just guys and gals just like you all. Those of you that are listening, those of us sitting in here, they put their socks and clothes on just like we do every day. What's the difference? They've chosen a career that requires extreme amount of emotional, physical, spiritual, in some cases, sacrifices to go out there every day and to serve their communities to try to make a difference. That's their heart. They're passionate people who truly want to make a difference in their community. And so when all of a sudden you have the media, like you said, pushing this stuff and painting everything with a broad brush, the impact that has on them is really powerful. There's almost a secondary trauma to the fact to when what you're doing and is so important and is such a passion and is so good and needed in our communities, and then you get a big voice, a media outlet or whatever, pushing against that and saying it's not a good thing or these are bad people out there doing this stuff, that really has a big impact. And morally, I mean, they're doing what they feel called to do to the best of their ability, and they work hard at it. And not only do they make sacrifices, their families make sacrifices. Their dads and their moms aren't home on all the holidays. I missed a lot of Christmases because I was at the fire station. I missed a lot of graduations and award ceremonies for my kids when they were young. I missed birthday parties and things like that. But I was dedicated and committed to my job. I loved my job. I loved doing it. And most of the men and women I talk to love what they do. But the responses they've been getting from the media and certain groups in certain communities has really been tough for them, because it's like they just want to yell and scream and go, don't you see what we do, what we're trying to do? And I think something else that's changed that really bothers me, that I've seen happen over the years, is unfortunately in some of our departments, some of those that are in leadership aren't as supportive as they used to be of our men and women. And that really concerns me. They got caught up in the politics. And I think I can look back and see where I saw that happen on the fire department and started happening for, like, let's say for LAPD, was when they took away the civil service status of the fire chief and the police chief. No longer were they brought up and put in position by the department. They were given that position by the mayor. At that point is when everything became political. For that chief of those departments to maintain their job, they have to kind of toe the line and go with the direction they feel that the mayor wants them to go, or they don't have a job. So their members, it appears to a lot of members that no longer are they the priority anymore, that the chiefs have made, some of these individuals that have been in power over the years have made their job the priority, not the men and women of their departments, and they start playing the political game, which has a great effect on their membership.
AM 1220 KHTS, 98.1 FM, your hometown station. Carl Goldman with you. We're talking with about the Santa Cruz Guardians, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, talk about suicide as well, coming up in a minute. But first, we're going to take this quick short break here on your hometown station. Hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS, 98.1 FM. Carl Goldman here with you, along with Tim Traurig, who's the president and founder of the Guardians Santa Clarita. We're going to learn more about the Guardians in a few minutes. We've been talking about a tough subject, and that's suicide. Here in the news, we had 5 attempted suicides, 4 actually committed suicide within a 36-hour period here in Santa Clarita from people connected with the Santa Clarita Valley Sheriffs. One, I think, was retired, 4 not retired. I knew one of them pretty well, and so my heart breaks for him and his family right now. And he was young; he was still in his 50s. And I sit there scratching my head trying to figure out what caused it. And Tim, you said early at the beginning of the program that gave both Jen and the pause, and that's that more are dying from suicide right now than from anything else for first responders. I thought about, KHTS owns an antique fire truck, a 1948 Mack fire
Beautiful,
truck.
I love it.
And occasionally when we take it out there, I'll have a former firefighter come up with tears in his eyes saying that he learned his first drive on the fire truck on a Mack fire truck. But as we get to talking, it's a fire truck that has sides on it and handles, and it's like the old Disney cartoon where Mickey's driving the fire truck and he turns a corner and people are grabbing the wheels. And our fire truck came from Pennsylvania, and actually a suburb of Philadelphia. And so the winters are tough, and so you can imagine what it would be like for a firefighter to ride on the outside, going fast to a fire and turning a corner. And the firefighters would tell me that more died on that Mack fire truck, riding the fire truck, than actually died in the fire. But now I suspect suicide is far greater than the old days of the Mack.
Yes, and it's funny that you mentioned, I was reminiscing while you were talking, because when I came on the job, we rode the back of the fire engines. So we hooked in on the back and stood on the back of the fire engines. They didn't have roofs on them back in those days in the 80s. And then over time, we finally got roofs, so we were out of the weather. But when it rained or it was cold, fortunately we live in California, so it's not as bad as some of those that live in other parts of the country. But it could get pretty crazy being on that. But yeah, now we're really seeing a lot change, over these years. And I think what we've seen happen in our community, Carl and Jen, is it's not just here. It's happening across our nation. And it's happening in cities all around our country where suicides are happening, and the men and women are really struggling. I think, too, we're getting into a whole nother generation of young people that are coming on the jobs now, that are going into our militaries, that I think their coping skills and maybe their maturity levels are a little different, too, than maybe back, many years ago. And two, they're so disconnected from individuals and people and socializing because they're on electronics and things like that, that when it comes to relating to people and talking and sharing and getting personal and intimate with the way you talk and share, we're kind of losing that because they're so into all these electronics and things. And I think we're seeing a culture of people that have come onto our departments and into our military now that just don't have the same coping skills. And you can learn some of those, but I think they haven't had the same exposure level that when it comes to just relational issues. They'll deal with it with a text instead of sitting in front of the person and having a really tough conversation. They do it from a distance. And when you're involved in these careers, you're deeply connected to some really serious emotional stuff. There's no text you can just text to get away from it.
Yeah, there's no emoji that will take care of it. You kind of took the words out of my mouth because I was thinking that, I feel like, I sound like my grandmother. I want to blame everything on social media lately, and I really do think that is the demise and decline of just how people treat each other. I mean, obviously, this situation we're talking about suicides in the force. Putting that aside, just how people say hello to each other in the streets and in the stores, and you see this terrible behavior in a grocery store. People are, destroying businesses, and it's just I really feel like. And this would be a much greater conversation. I really feel like you kind of back up a little bit and you look at what social media does, the negative parts of it, and it's just deteriorating how people treat each other.
Yes. And I think that's having a big impact, at least on even on some of the older guys and gals. But I mean, some of those that took their own lives recently were, some in their 50s. So these are people who've been around for a while, and they've matured and they probably have had a career for a while. And what we see in Guardians is a lot of these men and women, once they retire or they get away from what they used to do, there's a real culture shock. And I know for me, when I retired, I was shocked at the fact that once I left, everything got so quiet. It was like, where did everybody go? Because that was such a huge part of my social life. And so that's where I connected. That's where I felt understood, because you were like-minded individuals living together and working together and sacrificing together. And then you leave that and you're kind of on the outs. And I've heard that from a lot of our guardians, that once they left the force, or in some cases were injured or were put off for mental health reasons, the department just let go of them. That was it. They were on their own. And we were talking earlier about these young guys coming out of Afghanistan or the military, and they just kind of get put back into society. There's not a real good transitional opportunity for them. I know they've been working on that a little bit, but that's what you see happen for these guys that come out of law enforcement and the fire departments, and they're really lost. Their identity was being a cop. Their identity was being a firefighter or a soldier, the military, and then all of a sudden you're back in the civilian world.
Tim, the other point that you made earlier are the families, and obviously the families are greatly impacted for the four that committed suicide and the one that wanted to now. But I think families for all law enforcement have it tough, because every day their loved one is going out and facing danger and may not come home. And that's one side of it. And then you have a situation like we have with our son, who's military. He's done 4 deployments. And for those who don't know, when you do a deployment now in the Army, it's a 9-month deployment away from your family. The families do not go with you. And so it's tough, particularly if they're young kids. The spouse now is all alone, having to take care of the young kids, take care of all the repairs in the house, doing simple deeds like mowing the lawn, on top of doing everything, and having the fear that her spouse may not come home.
Yeah, that's so true. And they become the mom and the dad. And the kids are kind of missing that part of their family structure. Or they're missing a mom in some cases. There's a huge part of the family structure that's missing that really creates some challenges when it comes to families.
And for firefighters, you mentioned Thanksgivings you've missed, Christmases you've missed, New Year's Eves you missed, ball games you've missed, special graduations.
Yes.
So there's definitely a sacrificial side to being a first responder.
You bet. And my wife is very open about that too. During the season of time that I was on the job, because our family went through some traumatic stuff in our own family, I wasn't present to be a support as often as I could have been, because I was gone 24, 48, 72 hours at a time. Sometimes if we had a big fire, brush fire, whatever, I could be gone for 6-7 days. It just depends. And when mom's at home needing a break, no break. And then when dad comes home, he's exhausted. Yeah. He wants a break.
Right.
Now you can see the dynamics in the family that can really create some challenges for our population of people, just in relationships, not only with your wife or spouse, but with your children, and trying to connect with them and be present at an emotional level, because now we're battling the whole emotion thing, and that we're not comfortable there.
And then add the additional problem for the military side of it, where you're moved every 3 years,
Yeah.
so the family and friends and support system isn't going to be the same for someone who has to be deployed with that. We're going to learn more about the Guardians in a minute and take a short break here. on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. AM 1220 KHTS, your hometown station, 98.1 FM. We're talking about the Guardians Santa Clarita, and I'd be amiss not to give the website out now, even though we'll do it at the end of the program, and that's guardiansSCV.org. GuardiansSCV.org. I would encourage you to go take a look at that website, and I know, Tim, we're going to talk a bit about the Guardians right now, but I wanted to first of all thank you for the 9/11 event that you create every year, remembering that tragedy, and that's over off the old road, and it's a wonderful celebration.
Yep, thank you. That's our big event every year, is the 9/11 Patriots Day Car Show and Breakfast, where it's a day of just reflection and remembrance of those things that happened on 9/11.
So as we mentioned earlier in the show, the Guardians is open to any first responder here in Santa Clarita. You now are up to how many members?
We have over 80 members now, and when we started about 3 years ago, there was just a small group of about 13 of us, and we were sitting together talking as we've been kind of connecting with one another for about 5 years before that. We said, there's so much more we could do. What do you guys think about turning this into a nonprofit so we could really reach out more to the population of fire, police, and military? And they said, yeah. So we turned it into a nonprofit, and within 6 months, we quadrupled our attendance. So right away, we knew the need is there. And we've heard so many of this population say, gosh, I wish there was something like this for me when I was younger, that I could have learned some of these things when I was new on the job. And so the Guardians was really started out of initially with a small group was my dad being a Korean War vet. He was an LAPD officer. He was shot early in his career. His partner was killed. And I can look back today and see that my dad struggled with some trauma and never talked about it. Never talked about it. I was a young fireman at my third house as a rookie. A friend that I had made there, he was a single function paramedic, one day went behind an old fire station, put a coat hanger around his neck, and shot himself.
Wow.
I joined the CIA critical incident stress debriefing teams in the early 80s and thought I want to try to help. And then I had some family trauma, and out of that family trauma, my wife and I started another organization called The Light of Hope, which provides support for youth 14 to 26 struggling with substance abuse issues, depression, anxiety, cutting, eating disorders. What that organization runs by, we use an APG recovery model, alternative peer group recovery model. So for those many years, I saw the power of peer-to-peer support. And I thought, wow, it works so good here. I wonder if I can take that same kind of model and apply it to my population of fire, police, and military and get these guys and gals to open up, and let's see if the magic can happen. And so I started a small group kind of on a test to see, can I get them to open up? And it started by me having to be open and transparent about my own life, my own struggles. And what I found out is, sure enough, you give the opportunity, provide a safe place for these men and women to come to that's completely confidential, and other men and women open up and share, it unlocks that person, and then it unlocks that person, and then it unlocks that person. So we decided to turn this organization into really a peer-to-peer support program of providing support to all of our veterans, military, law enforcement, and firefighters, men and women who are active, retired, or in reserves. And what we've been doing in our community has really been trying to reach out to our local Sheirff's Department, local LA County Fire Department. We've gotten involved with veteran organizations out here. We've gone looking for homeless veterans in our washes and places around our community, and they're there. They've been pushed off. They're living in some of these places in our community, and it's sad that they're there, and we try to help them get their lives back. And then we've gotten really involved with our VFW post out here, post 6885, really trying to bring some life back into that group over there and share the camaraderie and connection that we find is so powerful in Guardians, and kind of giving that away and reaching out to those that really need it. And I think that if our population, fire, police, and military, would look at Guardians as a place, it's kind of like where you can go, and it's like maintenance. It's like where you go and you try to keep yourself in a healthy frame of mind, keep healthy relationships, keep healthy on the job if you're still on the job, keep healthy in your retirement, because there are a lot landmines and collateral damage to some of the stuff we've done, and it gets into every part of our lives. It gets us emotionally, it gets us physically with our bodies, but it gets into our relationships in our families. And so this is a place where they can go and just do life with one another. We say it's iron sharpens iron. We sharpen each other. And guys and gals are so much more comfortable amongst their peers, and many of them do not want to go sit in front of a counselor or a therapist. They can be helpful. I'm not against that. But for the most part, those counselors and therapists do not understand their world. They haven't been one. And that's what many of them say. They're not one of us. They don't know. They just talk what they got from a book, so they don't really know what we do. And they don't like that. So they'd rather be where they can talk with some of their peers who have been through what they've been through, have done that, know the struggles, but also know how to get out of that and how to get free and find, healing, in their life. And Guardians isn't just for people needing support. Guardians can be a place for guys and gals just to find camaraderie and connection, because that's what seems to miss when you look at suicides and you go look at some of the characteristics of those individuals is they withdraw, they stop connecting, they isolate. And so we're trying to get rid of that and bring them into a family of support amongst their peers and keep them connected, even though they might be going through something tough in their life or may go through something tough in their life 5 years from now, but at least they have a place that they know they can go.
Yeah. And do you have like special events for them, or is it mostly just like, hey, come meet us on Monday at 5 p.m. and we can kind of all just see where the ball goes in terms of conversation, or is it like a set scheduled, this is what we're discussing today?
Yes. Well, we have set group nights. So every Monday night at 7 o'clock, from 7 until 9. We meet in a really nice room at Higher Vision Church. They've given us a really great space to meet in. And so we meet there. That's weekly for our members, fire, police, and military men and women. And then also we have a Guardian Wives group. So we realize it's not just important to get the guys and gals support and healing. The families need it also. And so to give the wives or spouses a place where they can go and offload and talk about some of the challenges they face, then we're working on getting the whole family healthy, which is really needed. So we have those groups, and then once a month, on the first Monday of every month, we do what's called Family Night. It's family food night. So we provide, everything we do with Guardians is free. There's no charge. We do retreats. We do all of that. And it's all supported by our community and sponsors and great people that really see, and get what we're about and want to support in that. So we'll do retreats where once a year. We did our first retreat actually last year. Was powerful to get them out and away from just the hustle and bustle of everything that's going on here, and get away where they can breathe and really do some self-reflection and kind of take a look at themselves. We challenge them to kind of go, hey, how's my life right now? Am I happy with how I am? Am I under a lot of stress? Do I have things that really keep me awake at night, that keep coming back? These men and women have a carousel of slides that they'll never be able to unsee. And sometimes those slides get tapped into by certain things. It could be driving by a certain corner where something bad happened. Yeah. It could be a sound. It could be a smell. It could be, something that brings that slide back up and creates some anxiety, stress, trauma, even being re-traumatized in some cases with that. So we got the weekly groups. We do service projects. We go out in the community and we serve our veterans in this community and our law enforcement first responders. So next Wednesday, not this week, but next week, I forget what the date is, 25th. We're going out to Palmdale. They had the officer that was the deputy that was shot.
Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Yes, and we're going to go out there and we're going to just serve lunch to them. We're just going to spend time building relationships, connecting, and just being there with them and letting them know that there's a family of support if it's needed, and that they don't have to be that tough guy, that tough gal all the time, the superhero that the community sees us as, and I get that, but we're just real people. And to be willing to reach out and to somebody and say, hey, I need support or help, or I just want to come connect with you guys and hang out because I like hanging with fire, police, and military. Those are who my friends are. Those are people I feel the most comfortable with and safe around, and we have some amazing conversations during those times when we can get together like that. We have a 4x4 off-road club. Some of the guys are passionate about off-roading. So what a better way to connect than, okay, we set up some off-road events, and they get the community together that's also invited to get involved there too, because who knows what person you might get in contact with that maybe isn't fire, police, or military, but their neighbor is, or their brother is, or somebody in their family is that can say, hey, I went out with these guys and I know about this organization called Guardians. Hey, this is what they do. You ought to consider maybe checking them out. And they come and see us. So it's that peer-to-peer support that to me is the game changer. That's where the magic
But as you
happens.
mentioned, Tim, it's not just support, it's getting out and doing things. It's,
Yes.
Other than the 9/11 event, you rattled off a whole variety of things. And instead of a former retired first responder sitting on his couch watching a rerun of Cops, they can,
Right.
they can,
How do you know that?
they can go onto the website guardiansSCV.org to find out more about how you can become part of this. What about your vision for the future of the organization? You've done quite a bit in a short period of time, given the fact that most organizations here take a long time to evolve. Yeah, the Guardians have evolved very, very quickly, despite the fact that we got interrupted with COVID
Yes.
for a good chunk of that time. So what do you see for the Guardians down the road?
What our hope for and what we're moving towards is to continue to expand. So we're in the middle of right now of looking to start a Guardians in the San Fernando Valley at VFW post there, 2323. One of our members, who is the senior assistant commander there, has been a part of our Guardians group for quite a while, and really has a heart to want to see what we do here out there in the San Fernando Valley. And what sparked his interest was he started taking some of the things we were doing in our groups and started doing it at his post. And he started seeing the magic happen. And so we're looking at firing up an additional Guardians group in the San Fernando Valley. So wherever we can get other satellites of Guardians, because it's needed everywhere, we would love to go nationally and just see it, something that's adopted in every community, at least where they can have a place for fire, police, and military men and women, a safe place where they can go confidentially and just be supported, just connect, enjoy the camaraderie and banter that goes on. We would love to have our own facility. Right now, we've been so blessed by one of our local churches opening up their church to us to have a place to meet, and that's where we've
You
met.
can give a shout out to Higher
to Higher Vision.
Are there other organizations throughout the country that are similar to the Guardians?
I don't think there are other organizations that do more of an inpatient. They have programs set up where you might go and stay for a week or two, and you go through their program. But we're more of just kind of a grassroots organic, which kind of makes guys and gals feel a lot more comfortable. If you say, hey, do you want to get involved in we'd like you to come to a program, and we don't necessarily even like to call ours a program. It's really just a place of support. They kind of push back a little bit. Okay, what are they going to program me to do, right?
Yeah.
It's like they feel like they're going to go there and there's going to be all kinds of therapists, which there is in some cases, and they can be really helpful, but there's that resistance. There's a stigma there of, and so there is a lot of places that men and women can find treatment and get a higher level of care, and we say that Guardians isn't the answer for everyone, but it's a place to go and start and get support. And if you need a higher level of care, see, we have the connections for that, and we can point you the right direction where you find the right support. Because there's a lot of places out there that I feel, and even amongst addiction world, like with A Light of Hope, and where there are places out there that do it for the money, not for the people. And so it's hard to weed those out, and because you hate to see somebody use up all their insurance and their time and their personal money to go get help, and then it's not the right help. And that can be a big roadblock. And that's one of the reasons why anything we do with Guardians has been free when it comes to the support of our men and women, because we don't want any barriers to be there. We want them just to be able to come.
And so when you talk specifically about there's no charge, you do it for free. So how can I, just somebody who lives in the community, what can I do? Can I donate food? Can I donate supplies? Like you mentioned you do like a meal for everyone? Can I bring down, food or snacks or, something along those
Sure.
lines? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, we love having volunteers help, and we do when we put on special events like our 9/11 event. We just recently did Veterans Day event at the VFW. We love having volunteers come out, people who would love to support this community of people. And our Monday night food night, sure, if there was a family or a business or somebody wanted to come out and provide food for these men and women for that night,
Yeah.
that'd be awesome. We would love it. There's nothing better than getting the community involved with our organization, because our organization is made up of this community.
Right.
And these men and women are your neighbors, and they are men and women who are working in your community while you're sleeping, keeping your family safe. So what a better way to show support than to be involved with that organization. They can also go to our website, and there's donation there, a link there that they can support us financially, which is something we're growing at such a fast rate, and we really could use the funds. I'm just going to put it out there. The organizations don't run without money, and we don't do a whole bunch of, other than our big 9/11 event and small events here and there, where we raise a lot of money. And so we've had some really great people in our community step up and are big supporters of us. And as you saw at the 9/11, we had Porsche, we had BMW, we've had some of our local car dealerships get involved and support us, and other businesses that have come in and partnered with us for some of our events that make us feel and our group feel that we're not alone. We have community support, and especially with you all, Carl and Jerry and Janet here at KHTS, the support we get really is important to us, because you're our voice. It's how we can get out and connect, because one of the biggest things we try to do in this community is connect with our population of people. How do we find them? What is going on someplace that we can go to and find fire, police, and military men and women and go, hey, this is who we are. Come in and find it. And that's how a lot of the word gets out, is just mouth to mouth.
In fact, Tim, you made me think about a new program we just started with one of our sponsors, All Heart Heating and Air. We're going to be giving out, courtesy of All Heart, $1,000 each month to a different Santa Clarita nonprofit.
Oh, wow.
So I'll hook you up, and we can make sure the Guardians
Awesome.
gets put on that.
Thank you so much. That would be a blessing.
And then the one thought I had, we were kidding before this show about filling some time by having Tim and me singing White Christmas, which you do not want to hear
No, you do
at
not,
all.
please.
But maybe one program can be the Guardians going out and doing Christmas carols in a unique way.
Oh, that would be
So,
unique for sure. I have a feeling that most of these men and women, I've heard some of them too, aren't very good at singing. So I think we could be in deep trouble if we tried to create some kind of caroling group from Guardians. But who knows?
Actually, you might create a whole new dimension to caroling.
Oh, a whole new dimension for sure.
There might be hidden talents. You
Oh,
don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some hidden talents for sure in that group.
So the next meeting of the Guardians is when?
Next Monday at 7 p.m. at 28776 The Old Road in Valencia, in the park in Higher Vision Church, in the parking lot where LA Police Gear is, just north of the CHP station and just south of the 126 freeway off the old road.
And KHTS, we're going to do an article about this, which will be in our newsletter tomorrow via hometownstation.com. And on it, we have a whole list of support groups for suicide prevention, thinking about suicide, family groups, the Guardians certainly being one of them, but our hearts go out to the 4 families
Yes.
here in our community that have lost their lives in a short period of time from the Sheriff's Department with suicide. And
Yes.
as we've seen, the suicide numbers have just skyrocketed, not just here in Santa Clarita, not just with the first responders, but it's a bad situation. I think COVID had something to do with it, and
Yes.
then all the pressures that you talked about, Tim, definitely add up to it. So I encourage all of you to visit guardiansSCV.org, guardiansSCV.org. You've been listening to a special report here on KHTS, your hometown station.